Billionaire invites black janitor's daughter to play chess as joke. She's a child genius. Come here, little girl. Let's see if you can tell a pawn from a queen. The words cut through the crystal-laden dining room of the Ashford estate like a blade, causing 12 conversations to stop mid-sentence. Robert Ashford III, tech billionaire and host of Boston's most exclusive charity gala, gestured imperiously toward the corner where 12-year-old Zara Mitchell stood frozen, holding a tray of empty champagne glasses she'd been collecting for her mother. The room erupted in polite, cruel laughter. Men in $1,000 tuxedos. Women dripping in jewelry that cost more than most people's houses. All of them watching a black girl in a simple white server shirt, her hair pulled back in tight braids, becoming the evening's unexpected entertainment. Zara's mother, Diana Mitchell, felt her heart stop. She'd been working as the Ashford estate's head custodian for 8 years, taking every extra shift, every humiliating task, raising Zara alone after her husband's death. And now her boss, the man who signed her paychecks, was using her daughter as a punchline. "Mr. Ashford, she's supposed to be helping me," Diana started, but Robert cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Nonsense, Diana. This is educational." He turned back to Zara with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're raising money for underprivileged youth programs tonight. What better way to demonstrate the need than to show these good people what passes for education in, well, wherever it is you go to school?" The room tittered again. Senator Patricia Gaines, seated near the marble fireplace, shifted uncomfortably in her chair but said nothing. Tech magnate David Chun stared into his wine glass. Nobody challenged Robert Ashford in his own home. Not if they wanted to keep their business partnerships, their social standing, their carefully cultivated access to his billion-dollar network. Zara carefully set down the tray, her hands steady despite the storm building in her chest. She was 12 years old, but she'd already learned that the world was full of people who looked at her and saw only limitations. Her worn sneakers beneath the serving uniform. Her second-hand backpack. The scholarship student ID card she carried for the public school across town. What they didn't see was the chess book hidden in that backpack. The same book she'd been reading by flashlight every night for 4 years, ever since she'd found it in a free library box outside a coffee shop. The same book that had led her to the public library's chess club, where a retired teacher named Mr. Lawrence spent his Saturdays teaching kids like her the game that had changed his life. "I know how the pieces move, sir," Zara said quietly, and something in her voice made Senator Gaines look up sharply. Robert laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. "Excellent. Then let's make this interesting." He gestured to the antique Staunton chess set displayed on a side table, each piece hand-carved from ebony and ivory, worth more than Diana made in 6 months. "You and me right now. If you can last 10 moves without making a fool of yourself, I'll donate an extra $1,000 to tonight's cause." The implication hung heavy in the air. When you make a fool of yourself, not if. Diana took a step forward, her voice shaking. "Mr. Ashford, please. She's just a child." "Who's about to learn a valuable lesson about knowing one's limitations?" Robert interrupted smoothly. He was already moving toward the chess set, beckoning Zara to follow. "Come along, girl. Don't be shy. These lovely people paid good money for their entertainment tonight." Zara met her mother's eyes across the room. Diana's face showed a mixture of fear, anger, and something else, a question. Zara gave the smallest nod, so subtle that only someone who knew her well would catch it. "Trust me, Mom. I've got this." What Robert Ashford didn't know, what none of these wealthy, comfortable people could possibly know, was that the little girl he was about to humiliate had spent 4 years studying chess with an intensity that bordered on obsession. That she'd memorized over 100 opening variations. That she'd analyzed games by Kasparov, Tal, and Fischer until she could recreate them move by move from memory. That she'd competed in every free tournament within a 50-mile radius, quietly building a rating that would shock everyone in this room if they bothered to look. But most importantly, Robert didn't know that 3 months ago, Zara had qualified for the National Youth Chess Championship with a perfect score in her age division. Or that the quiet, unassuming Mr. Lawrence who taught her at the library wasn't just a retired teacher. He was a former international master who'd recognized in Zara something he'd only seen a handful of times in his 50 years around the game. Not just talent. Not just dedication. But the kind of rare, brilliant mind that comes along once in a generation. As Zara approached the chessboard, her worn sneakers silent on the expensive hardwood floor, she allowed herself a small secret smile. Robert Ashford thought he was about to teach her a lesson about her place in the world. He had no idea he was about to learn one himself. The pieces were being set up. The crowd was gathering, wine glasses in hand, ready to witness what they assumed would be a quick, embarrassing defeat for a child who should have known better than to accept such an obviously one-sided challenge. None of them noticed the way Senator Gaines had pulled out her phone, positioning it discreetly to record. None of them saw David Chun lean forward, suddenly paying very close attention. And none of them caught the look that passed between Diana Mitchell and her daughter, a look that spoke of late nights studying together, of sacrifices made, of a secret carefully guarded until exactly the right moment. If this story about a child who refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose, and a mother who believed in her daughter even when the world didn't, has captured your attention, you'll want to see what happens when Zara makes her first move, because what comes next will challenge everything these people think they know about talent, privilege, and who deserves a seat at the table. Robert Ashford settled into his chair with the casual confidence of a man who'd never been challenged in his own home. He arranged the white pieces with theatrical precision, making sure everyone in the room had a clear view of what he clearly expected to be a brief, educational humiliation. "White always moves first, dear," he said to Zara with exaggerated patience, the kind of tone reserved for explaining simple concepts to small children. "That's me. You'll have the black pieces. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Zara's voice was steady, almost eerily calm for a 12-year-old being put on display in front of 50 wealthy strangers. Diana stood near the wall, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She recognized that calmness in her daughter's voice. It was the same tone Zara used when she was solving a particularly difficult math problem, or when she was 3 moves away from checkmate in one of her library games. It was the sound of her daughter's mind working at full speed while appearing perfectly still on the surface. Robert opened with e4, the king's pawn opening, moving with a flourish that suggested he'd played this exact position hundreds of times at his country club. "The most classical opening in chess," he announced to the room. "Used by grandmasters for centuries. Let's see what our young friend does with it." Without hesitation, Zara responded with c5. The Sicilian defense. The room went quiet for a heartbeat too long. Robert's smile flickered, just slightly. That wasn't the confused, tentative move of a beginner. It was one of the most theoretically complex and aggressive responses in chess. "Someone's been reading," Robert said, trying to maintain his condescending tone. "The Sicilian. How ambitious." But there was an edge to his voice now, a hint of uncertainty that Senator Gaines caught immediately. David Chun set down his wineglass, his full attention now on the board. He'd played competitive chess in college, and he recognized what was happening. This wasn't going to be the quick, embarrassing defeat Robert had orchestrated for his entertainment. Robert played nf3, developing his knight. Standard theory. Zara responded immediately with d6, then nf6, then g6, setting up the dragon variation of the Sicilian with a speed that suggested she wasn't thinking at all, just playing from deep memory. "Mr. Ashford," David Chun called out, unable to help himself. "I think you should know that the kid is setting up a dragon. That's not beginner's chess." Robert shot him an irritated glance. "I can see what she's doing, David. I learned chess at Harvard, not some public library." But his next moves came slower now. The easy confidence was cracking. Zara was developing her pieces with perfect efficiency, every move serving multiple purposes, controlling key squares, preparing for the middle game. Her face showed no emotion, no fear, no pride. Just focus. Senator Gaines zoomed in slightly with her phone camera, making sure she captured Robert's face as well as the board. Her political instincts were screaming that something important was happening here, something that would matter beyond this room. "You know," Robert said, trying to regain control of the narrative as he castled kingside, "chess is really about planning ahead. Years ahead. Like running a business empire." He gestured broadly to the assembled guests. "You can't just react to what's in front of you. You need vision. Strategy. The kind of big-picture thinking that comes from proper education." He was talking to the room, but his eyes kept darting back to the board, where Zara had just castled queenside, a sharp, aggressive choice that transformed the position into a race to attack opposite sides of the board. Diana felt her breath catch. She'd watched Zara study positions like this for hours, analyzing games where both players launched all-out attacks, where one mistake meant instant defeat. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Mr. Ashford studied economics at Harvard, one of the guests offered, clearly trying to bolster Robert's position. He revolutionized cloud computing architecture. Built a billion-dollar company from scratch. That's right, Margaret, Robert said, seizing the lifeline. Success isn't about one isolated skill. It's about understanding systems. Seeing the big picture. He pushed a pawn forward on the king side, beginning his attack. Something you learn at institutions that value excellence. Zara moved her rook to c8, pressuring his c-file. Still no hesitation. Still no wasted motion. My daughter goes to Washington Elementary, Diana heard herself say, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Every eye in the room turned to her. It's not Harvard. The library only has 2 computers that work. The gym doubles as a cafeteria. But the teachers care about every single student, and they don't measure worth by how much money their parents make. The silence that followed was profound. Diana had never spoken back to Robert Ashford. In 8 years of cleaning his house, she perfected the art of being invisible, unheard, efficiently present but never challenging. Robert's jaw tightened. Diana, perhaps you should return to your duties. It's your move, sir, Zara interrupted softly, and there was something in her tone, not disrespectful but absolute, that made Robert's face flush. He looked down at the board and for the first time, really studied the position. Zara had built up a massive attack on the queen side. Her pieces were perfectly coordinated, aimed at his king like arrows ready to fly. His own attack on the king side suddenly looked slow, clumsy by comparison. This is a classic dragon versus Yugoslav attack position, David Chun murmured to Senator Gaines. I've played this exact setup before. The kid's playing it perfectly, like she's memorized entire games from grandmaster databases. Robert pushed another pawn, trying to accelerate his attack, but his hand trembled slightly as he released the piece. Zara immediately responded with rxc3, a rook sacrifice that made half the room gasp. She just gave away her rook, Margaret whispered. She's losing. But David Chun was shaking his head, his eyes wide. No. Oh no. Robert, don't take that rook. Robert looked up, annoyed. What are you talking about? She blundered. Obviously, I take. He reached for the piece. Sir, Zara said quietly, and Robert's hand stopped halfway to the board. Before you decide, you might want to look 3 moves ahead. The challenge in those words was unmistakable. Every person in the room felt it, the shift from entertainment to something else entirely. This wasn't a child being taught a lesson anymore. This was a student offering her teacher an education. Robert's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, concentration, then something like fear as he finally saw what Zara had seen 6 moves ago. If he took the rook, her queen and bishop would deliver checkmate in 3 moves. Every escape square was covered. Every defensive piece was either blocked or pinned. It was a trap so elegant, so perfectly constructed, that there was no way out. He'd been losing for the last 5 moves without realizing it, so focused on his own attack that he'd missed the guillotine being assembled around his king. You've been sandbagging, Robert said, and his voice had gone cold. Someone coached you. Told you exactly what moves to make. Zara met his eyes steadily. No, sir. I've been studying. 4 years, every single day. At the library, because we can't afford chess books. With Mr. Lawrence, who volunteers his time because he believes kids like me deserve to learn. Playing in free tournaments on weekends, while you were probably playing golf. The room was dead silent. Senator Gaines' phone captured everything, the board position, Robert's face, and most importantly, the calm dignity of a 12-year-old girl who just exposed exactly how a billion-dollar empire had been built, by underestimating everyone who didn't look, sound, or live like him. This is ridiculous, Robert pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. I won't be humiliated by some. He stopped himself, but everyone heard the word he didn't say. It hung in the air like smoke. Diana stepped forward, and for the first time in 8 years, she didn't lower her eyes. Say it, Mr. Ashford. Finish that sentence. Let everyone here see who you really are when the mask slips. Robert's face had gone crimson. Around the room, his guests were exchanging glances, some uncomfortable, some calculating. Senator Gaines was still recording. David Chun had pulled out his own phone. This moment was being documented, and Robert finally realized that trying to humiliate a child had been the worst mistake of his life. "The game isn't over," Zara said into the silence. "You still have moves. You could resign with dignity, or we can play it out and everyone can watch exactly how this ends." And in that moment, everyone in the room understood something profound. This wasn't about chess anymore. It was about power and privilege, and a 12-year-old girl who'd just proven that talent doesn't care about zip codes or bank accounts. Robert looked at the board, at the inescapable trap, at the faces of his guests no longer laughing but watching with something like shame. He looked at Diana, standing tall for the first time since he'd known her. And he looked at Zara, who'd stayed silent and small and underestimated right up until the perfect moment to show the world exactly who she was. What he didn't know yet was that this chess game was only the beginning. That Senator Gaines wasn't just recording for posterity, she was already drafting a social media post that would change everything. That David Chun was texting his wife, a journalist, with the story of a lifetime. And that in exactly 48 hours, Zara Mitchell's name would be everywhere, forcing a national conversation about who gets opportunities and who gets overlooked. But most importantly, he didn't know that Mr. Lawrence, the retired teacher who'd coached Zara, was currently sitting in his living room watching this entire scene unfold on the security camera feed that Diana had secretly given him access to, making phone calls to chess organizations, universities, and scholarships foundations, setting in motion events that would transform not just Zara's life, but the lives of thousands of kids like her. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. And Robert Ashford had made the fatal mistake of treating it like a joke. Robert Ashford's hand hovered over the board, frozen in a moment of impossible choice. Resign and admit defeat to a 12-year-old in front of Boston's elite, or play on and let everyone watch the systematic destruction of his position move by excruciating move. "I need a moment," he said, standing abruptly. "This is absurd. Diana, get your daughter out of here. This whole thing has gotten out of hand." "Sit down, Robert." Senator Gaines' voice cut across the room like steel. She was no longer recording discreetly, her phone was openly pointed at him now. "You started this game. Have the decency to finish it." "Patricia, this is my home." "And this is my footage," Gaines interrupted coolly, "of a billionaire attempting to humiliate a child for entertainment. The question is whether it ends with you losing gracefully or losing while the whole world watches you reveal who you really are." The threat was unmistakable. Robert's face cycled through rage, fear, and calculation. He was a businessman above all else. He understood leverage when he saw it. He sat back down. "Your move, sir," Zara said softly. Robert pushed a pawn forward with shaking hands, a meaningless move, just delaying the inevitable. Zara responded instantly with BXF3, removing his last defender. The end was now 2 moves away. Diana felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who'd looked through her for 8 years like she was part of the furniture. "Mrs. Mitchell," David Chun approached her quietly, while all eyes remained on the board. "I need to tell you something. About your daughter." Diana tensed, expecting another condescending comment, another explanation of how this must all be luck or coaching or anything except Zara's actual ability. 3 weeks ago, Chun continued in a low voice, "My company hosted a youth coding competition. 500 kids competed. Your daughter won. Not just won, she built an algorithm that my senior engineers are still studying." Diana's breath caught. "What?" "She submitted it under a username. We only found out her real identity when we tried to award the prize, a full scholarship to our summer tech camp." Chun smiled slightly. She turned it down. Said she couldn't afford to miss her library chess sessions. Diana's hand flew to her mouth. Zara had never mentioned any of this. How many other things had her daughter accomplished in silence, not wanting to burden her mother with pride when there was barely enough money for food? On the board, Robert was trying to find a defense that didn't exist. Every move he considered led to the same brutal checkmate. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air-conditioned comfort of the room. "You know what's fascinating?" Senator Gaines said loudly, addressing the room. "Mr. Ashford built his fortune on identifying talent. His company's entire model is finding brilliant engineers and giving them resources to innovate. Yet somehow, he completely missed the prodigy cleaning his house for 8 years. "She's a custodian," someone muttered. How was he supposed to know? "That's exactly the point," Gaines interrupted sharply. He never looked. None of us did. We saw the uniform instead of the person wearing it. Robert finally moved, a desperate peace sacrifice that only delayed checkmate by one additional move. Zara accepted it calmly, positioning her queen for the final blow. I want to tell you all something, Diana heard herself saying. Every eye in the room turned to her. Her heart was pounding, but she thought of Zara's calm at the board, and she found her own courage. 4 years ago, when Zara was 8, she came home crying because a teacher told her that chess was too complicated for kids from her neighborhood. Said she should focus on practical skills. The room was silent. That night, Zara asked me if we were stupid because we're poor. If the teacher was right that some things weren't meant for people like us. Diana's voice cracked but held. I told her that the world would try to make her small every single day of her life. That people would look at where we live, what we wear, the color of our skin, and decide they already knew everything about her. And that the only way to prove them wrong was to be undeniable. She looked directly at Robert. So she became undeniable. Zara moved her queen to the final square. Checkmate. The word fell into profound silence. Robert stared at the board as if he could will the pieces to rearrange themselves. They didn't. Senator Gaines stopped recording. Well, she said briskly, I believe you promised an extra $1,000 if she lasted 10 moves without embarrassing herself, Robert. She made it to move 17 and destroyed you. I think that deserves rather more, don't you? Robert's jaw worked soundlessly. Around the room, his guests were no longer looking at him with respect or envy. Margaret had quietly moved toward the door. Others were checking their phones, already distancing themselves from what they could feel becoming a scandal. Mr. Ashford, Zara said, and something in her voice made everyone look at her. You asked earlier if I understood about planning ahead. About seeing the big picture. She stood up, all 4 feet 9 inches of her, and met the billionaire's eyes without flinching. I've been planning for 4 years. Every morning, I wake up at 5 a.m. to study chess before school because it's the only quiet time in our apartment. Every weekend, I take 3 buses to get to the library because Mom needs our car for her second job. Every night, I solve tactical puzzles by flashlight because we can't afford to keep the lights on late. Her voice never rose, but the intensity in it silenced the room completely. I didn't do all of that to beat you at chess tonight, sir. I did it because I refuse to let people like you decide what I'm capable of. And I'll keep doing it, every single day, until people like me don't have to be undeniable just to be seen. Diana couldn't stop the tears now. Neither could Senator Gaines. Even David Chun looked away, blinking hard. Robert stood slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled fury and humiliation. Get out, he said quietly. Both of you. You're fired, Diana. I want you gone tonight. No need, Diana said, and her voice was steady as stone. I quit. 8 years was long enough to work for someone who never saw my worth. She walked to Zara, took her daughter's hand, and they headed for the door together. As they passed Senator Gaines, the politician quietly pressed a business card into Diana's palm. David Chun did the same, whispering, "Call me Monday." They were almost to the exit when a voice stopped them. Wait. It was Robert, and something in his tone had changed. Broken, almost. How did you learn all of that? Really? Zara turned back. Mr. Lawrence. At the library. He saw me trying to teach myself chess from a damaged book and asked if I wanted real lessons. He's been coaching me for free, 3 times a week, for 4 years. Mr. Lawrence, Robert repeated, and something flickered across his face. Leonard Lawrence. You know him? Diana asked. He's an international master. Used to coach at MIT until he retired. Robert's voice was hollow. I tried to hire him 5 years ago to teach my nephew. He quoted me $500 an hour and said he only worked with students who had real passion for the game. The implication hung in the air. Leonard Lawrence had turned down a fortune from Robert Ashford, but had spent 4 years teaching Zara Mitchell for free. Because he'd seen in her what Robert had been too blind to recognize. That's not all, David Chun spoke up. Mr. Lawrence didn't just teach her chess. He's been connecting her with other opportunities too. That coding competition I mentioned? He told her about it. The math Olympiad she placed in last month? Him. The essay contest she won? Same. Diana turned to stare at her daughter. Zara, you won a math Olympiad? Zara shrugged, embarrassed. Second place. Only $50 prize. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd try to celebrate and we couldn't afford. Oh baby, Diana pulled her daughter close, not caring that they were still in Robert Ashford's mansion, that people were watching. You've been carrying all of this alone? Not alone, Zara whispered. Mr. Lawrence always said I should tell you everything, but I knew you were working so hard already. I didn't want you to worry that I needed things we couldn't afford. Senator Gaines stepped forward, her phone now tucked away. Mrs. Mitchell, Zara, I'd like to talk to you both about something. Not tonight. You've been through enough. But I chair the Education Committee, and I've been looking for a real story to illustrate why our current system is failing. This, she gestured at the chessboard, at Robert's defeated posture, at the room full of wealthy people who've been forced to confront their own blindness. This is that story. We don't want charity, Diana said firmly. Good. Because I'm not offering it. Gaines smiled. I'm offering a platform. Zara's story, your story, could change how we fund education in this country. But only if you're willing to go public. To let the world see what talent looks like when it doesn't come wrapped in privilege. Diana looked at Zara, a question in her eyes. Zara thought for a long moment, then nodded slowly. But first, Zara said, I need to do something. She walked back to the chessboard and carefully began resetting the pieces to their starting positions. Every person in the room watched, confused, as she arranged each piece with precise care. Mr. Ashford, she said quietly, would you like to play again? For real this time. No jokes. No audience. Just chess. The room held its breath. Robert stared at the girl who just humiliated him, who he just fired her mother, who had every reason to walk away and never look back. Why? He managed to ask. Zara smiled, and it was the first real smile anyone had seen from her all night. Because Mr. Lawrence taught me that chess isn't about making other people feel small. It's about making yourself better. And I think maybe you forgot that somewhere along the way. She extended her hand across the board. So let's play. Like students. Both of us learning. What Robert Ashford did in the next 10 seconds would define not just this moment, but everything that came after. The video Senator Gaines had recorded was already uploaded privately, ready to go viral with one button push. David Chen's wife had the story drafted. The room full of witnesses waited to see if a man who'd built an empire on being right could admit he'd been catastrophically wrong. And in that moment, Robert saw two paths. One where he doubled down, threw them out, and spent the rest of his life as the billionaire who tried to humiliate a child. Or one where he took the hand being offered by someone who had every reason to hate him but was choosing grace instead. Slowly, Robert reached across the board and shook Zara's hand. Teach me, he said, and his voice cracked. Please. Show me what I've been too blind to see. The second game was nothing like the first. Robert played without his earlier arrogance, and Zara played without needing to prove anything. The guests who remained, fewer now, but those who stayed were genuinely curious, watched a completely different dynamic unfold. This wasn't performance. It was education. There, Zara said on move 12, pointing to a square Robert hadn't considered. If you move your knight there instead, you create a fork. See? It threatens both my rook and my bishop. Robert studied the position, and something like wonder crossed his face. I didn't see that. Most people don't on their first look. Mr. Lawrence taught me that chess is about training your eyes to see patterns. It takes thousands of games. She moved her rook, deliberately avoiding the trap. Try it again. Find another tactic. Diana watched her daughter transform into a teacher, patient and clear, and felt her heart might burst. This was who Zara was when she wasn't being forced to be small. This was the girl who spent hours explaining math homework to struggling classmates, who volunteered at the community center teaching younger kids to read. Senator Gaines sat down next to Diana quietly. I want you to understand what's about to happen, she said in a low voice. When I release that video, Zara's life will change completely. Media attention. Interview requests. People trying to turn her into a symbol. It won't all be positive. I know, Diana said, watching her daughter. But staying invisible hasn't kept us safe. It's just kept us small. There's something else. Gaines hesitated. Leonard Lawrence called me an hour ago. Diana's head snapped around. How did he? He's been watching on the security feed you gave him access to. He's already contacted 3 universities with full-ride scholarship offers for Zara. Starting next year, if she wants. MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. Gaines paused. She's 12, Diana. These are college offers. Diana felt the room spin. That's impossible. She hasn't even finished middle school. There's precedent. Chess prodigies who test into advanced programs. Especially when they've already proven themselves in other areas. Gaines pulled out her phone, showed Diana a message. The coding competition David mentioned? Zara's algorithm is being used by his company right now. They want to hire her as a consultant. She'd be their youngest employee ever, by about 15 years. She's a child, Diana whispered. She needs to be a child. I agree. Which is why Leonard's recommendation is different. Gaines scrolled to another message. There's a private academy in Boston. Full scholarship, grades 7 to 12. Small classes, individualized curriculum. They have a competitive chess team, advanced STEM programs, and a policy that students under 16 can't work more than 10 hours a week on outside projects. She'd get to be a kid and a genius. Diana looked at the business card David Chun had given her, then at the one from Senator Gaines. In the span of 2 hours, her daughter had gone from invisible to having more opportunities than Diana could process. On the chessboard, Robert made a move and looked up hopefully. Better. Zara smiled. Much better. You're learning. Mr. Ashford, David Chen interrupted. Can I speak with you for a moment? Privately. Robert glanced at Zara, who nodded permission. The 2 men stepped into the hallway, and Diana watched through the doorway as Chen showed Robert something on his phone. Robert's face went pale, then red, then pale again. They returned a few minutes later. Robert wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. What's wrong? Zara asked. Nothing's wrong, Chen said carefully. But there's something you should know. Mr. Ashford, would you like to explain? Robert looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. The charity tonight, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The fundraiser for underprivileged youth programs. The organization we're raising money for, he stopped, swallowed hard. It's a sham. The director is my cousin. Only about 15% of the money actually goes to kids. The rest is administrative fees that mostly come back to my family. The room went dead silent. Senator Gaines stood up slowly, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Excuse me. David found the tax documents, Robert continued miserably. He was researching the organization to see if they could help Zara and discovered the whole thing is essentially a tax shelter. We've been doing it for years. Diana felt rage build in her chest like fire. You used my daughter to raise money for a fake charity? You humiliated her to make yourself look generous while you were stealing from actual children who needed help. I didn't know, Robert started, but the words died under Diana's glare. You didn't want to know, Diana corrected icily. Just like you didn't want to know that your custodian had a daughter who could outthink you. Just like you didn't want to know where your money was really going, as long as you got the tax deduction and the reputation boost. Zara stood up from the chessboard. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute moral authority. Mr. Lawrence told me that chess teaches you to take responsibility for your mistakes. That every loss is an opportunity to learn. But you have to be honest about why you lost. She looked at Robert steadily. Why did you really invite me to play tonight? Robert opened his mouth, closed it. The easy lies wouldn't come anymore, not under the gaze of a child who'd proven herself smarter than him in every way that mattered. Because I wanted to feel superior, he finally said, and the admission seemed to cost him something vital. Because I'd had a terrible quarter, and I needed to feel like I was still the smartest person in the room. And you were there and you were, he stopped. Black, Zara finished. Poor. Young. Female. Everything you've been taught means inferior. Yes. The word came out broken. Senator Gaines pulled out her phone. Here's what's going to happen. That video I recorded? It goes public tonight. along with the information about your fraudulent charity. You have one chance to control this narrative, Robert. Patricia, please. Let me finish. Her voice was granite. You will dissolve that fake charity immediately and donate $10 million to establish a real foundation. The Zara Mitchell Education Fund. It will provide scholarships, chess programs, and STEM resources to underprivileged youth in Boston. Diana will sit on the board. Leonard Lawrence will direct the chess program. And you will have absolutely no control over how the money is spent. $10 million. Is less than you spent on your yacht last year, Gaines interrupted. And it's non-negotiable. Because the alternative is that I release this video with no context, no redemption, just a billionaire being exposed as a fraud and a bigot. Your choice. Robert looked around the room. Margaret was already gone. The other guests were backing toward the door, clearly wanting no part of what was coming. Only David Chun remained, watching with an expression that mixed disappointment and something like hope. There's more, Chun said quietly. I've been authorized by my board to offer Diana a position. Director of Community Outreach for Chen Technologies. Salary $187,000 a year plus full benefits. Her job would be to identify overlooked talent in communities we've been ignoring. He looked at Diana. People like your daughter. People we should have been seeing all along. Diana felt tears streaming down her face. $187,000? That's more than I've made in the last 5 years combined. It's what the position should have been paying all along. We've just been hiring the wrong people. Chun smiled slightly. People who went to the right schools but didn't know how to spot actual genius when it was standing right in front of them. Zara walked over to her mother and took her hand. Mom, you don't have to decide right now. We can go home and think. Yes, Diana said immediately, looking at Chun. Yes, I'll take it. When do I start? Monday, if you want. We'll handle all the paperwork. Chen handed her a folder. Everything's already prepared. I started drafting it the moment I saw Zara play her fifth move and realized what we were witnessing. Robert sank into his chair, looking older than he had 2 hours ago. I'll make the donation, he said quietly. The foundation. All of it. But I want one thing in return. You're not in a position to negotiate, Gaines said sharply. Not a negotiation. A request. Robert looked at Zara. Would you be willing to teach me? Really teach me. Not chess. How to see what I've been missing. How to be better than I've been. Zara studied him for a long moment. That's not something I can teach, Mr. Ashford. That's something you have to want for yourself. I do, Robert said, and for the first time, he sounded like he meant it. I've spent 50 years being smart about money and stupid about people. Tonight, a 12-year-old showed me that everything I built is hollow because I built it on not seeing half the population. He stood up, walked to Diana. I can't undo 8 years of being blind. I can't give you back the dignity I took every time I walked past you without seeing you. But I can try to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. If you'll let me. Diana looked at the man who'd employed her for 8 years without learning her daughter's name. The man who'd tried to humiliate Zara for entertainment. The man who was now standing in front of her with something that looked like genuine remorse. Actions, Diana said finally. Not words. Show me you mean it. I will. Robert turned to Senator Gaines. Release the video. All of it. I won't fight it. People should see who I was tonight. And then if I'm lucky, maybe someday they'll see who I'm trying to become. Gaines studied him, her politician's instincts clearly warring with surprise. You're sure? This will destroy your reputation. My reputation was built on being someone worth destroying, Robert said quietly. Maybe it's time to build something real instead. Senator Gaines tapped her phone. The video uploaded. Within 30 seconds, the first comments started appearing. Within 2 minutes, the first shares. Within 5 minutes, Billionaire humiliated by 12-year-old chess prodigy was trending nationwide. But the story didn't end there. Because Gaines had included the full video, not just the chess game, but Robert's admission. His agreement to the foundation. The moment of genuine remorse. And most importantly, Zara's grace in teaching him afterward. The narrative became more complex than just rich villain gets destroyed. It became a story about accountability, about growth, about a child who chose education over revenge. David Chen's wife, a journalist for the Boston Globe, published her article an hour later, "The Girl Nobody Saw: How America's Education System Fails Its Brightest Minds." It went viral faster than the video. By midnight, Zara Mitchell's name was everywhere. The chess prodigy. The coding genius. The girl who'd won a math Olympiad and turned down tech camps because she couldn't miss library sessions with a volunteer coach who saw her worth. And Robert Ashford's name was everywhere too. But not just as the billionaire who got beaten at chess. As the man who'd been publicly exposed, who could have denied everything, who could have buried the story with lawyers and PR firms, but instead chose to own his failure and try to fix it. The internet couldn't decide if he was a villain seeking redemption or a fraud trying to buy his way out of consequences. But everyone agreed on one thing: Zara Mitchell was exactly the kind of genius America had been overlooking, and it was time to start looking harder. 18 months later, Zara Mitchell stood at the podium of the National Education Summit in Washington, D.C., looking out at an audience of 2,000 educators, politicians, and philanthropists. At 13 years old, she was the youngest keynote speaker in the summit's 40-year history. Behind her on the screen, a photo showed the Ashford Estate chess game that had changed everything. The image had become iconic: a small black girl in a server's uniform, standing calmly across from a billionaire who tried to make her a joke. "People ask me all the time if I'm angry about that night," Zara began, her voice steady and clear. "They want me to be angry. It makes for a better story, the underdog defeating the villain. But that's not what happened." She clicked to the next slide, a photo of the Zara Mitchell Education Fund headquarters, a renovated community center in Roxbury that now served 800 students. What happened is that one man's blindness got exposed. And instead of hiding from it, he chose to do something about it. In the last 18 months, the foundation has provided full chess scholarships to 400 students, coding camps for 300 more, math enrichment programs in 12 schools that had none. Another click. This image showed Zara herself, teaching chess to a room full of elementary school children, their faces bright with concentration. But the foundation isn't what changed things. What changed is that people started asking why it took a viral video to see what was always there. Why we needed a scandal to notice that brilliant kids exist in every neighborhood, every income level, every background. Diana watched from the front row, sitting between Senator Gaines and David Chen. Her new position at Chen Technologies had evolved beyond what anyone expected. She'd built a talent pipeline that had identified and supported 73 overlooked students in the last year alone, kids who'd gone on to win competitions, earn scholarships, and prove that genius doesn't require privilege. Leonard Lawrence sat 2 rows back, beaming with quiet pride. At 73, he'd come out of retirement to direct the foundation's chess program. Under his guidance, students from the program had won 6 national championships in their age divisions. 3 had earned international master titles. And Zara herself, at 13, was now the youngest ever female candidate for Grandmaster in American history. Robert Ashford sat further back, almost hidden. He'd insisted on coming but refused to sit anywhere prominent. In 18 months, he'd transformed from Boston's most celebrated tech billionaire to its most complicated figure. The viral video had cost him business partnerships, country club memberships, and countless friendships. His company's stock had dropped 23% before stabilizing. But he'd kept his promise. The foundation had received its full $10 million, plus an additional $4 million he donated quietly afterward. He'd shut down the fraudulent charity and testified against his cousin in the subsequent investigation. And every Tuesday evening for the last 18 months, he'd shown up at the community center to volunteer, not as a benefactor or celebrity, but as a student learning chess from kids who would have been invisible to him before. "Mr. Ashford," a reporter had asked him 6 months earlier, "do you regret what happened that night?" Robert had taken a long time to answer. "I regret who I was. But I'm grateful I was exposed, because I'm becoming someone better. That doesn't undo the harm. It doesn't erase 8 years of not seeing Diana Mitchell, or a lifetime of not seeing thousands of people like her. But it's a start." The interview had gone viral too, sparking fierce debate. Some people believed in redemption. Others argued he was just a billionaire buying his way out of consequences. The truth, as usual, was more complicated than either narrative allowed. On stage, Zara continued. My mom taught me something important. She said the world will try to make you small every day. That you have to choose whether to accept that or to become undeniable. She paused, looking directly at the camera broadcasting this speech live to millions. But I've learned something else. Being undeniable isn't enough. Because if only the exceptional get seen, then we're still leaving most people invisible. The goal isn't to be so brilliant that you can't be ignored. The goal is to build a world where everyone gets seen, whether they're brilliant or not. Diana felt tears on her face. Her daughter had grown so much in 18 months, not just in skill or recognition, but in wisdom that most adults never achieved. I got lucky, Zara said. I had Mr. Lawrence, who saw potential instead of poverty. I had a mom who worked herself to exhaustion so I could have books and bus fare to the library. I had Senator Gaines, who used her platform to amplify my story instead of just recording it for views. She clicked to a new slide, a photo of herself at Washington Academy, surrounded by classmates of every background. Now I go to a school where I'm not the only scholarship student. Where the chess team has kids from every zip code in Boston. Where nobody asks if you belong because we've all earned our place. Zara smiled. But that school only exists because people demanded change after my story went viral. Which means there are still thousands of schools where brilliant kids are invisible because nobody's demanding anything. Senator Gaines leaned over to whisper to Diana. She's better at this than most politicians I know. She learned from the best, Diana whispered back, squeezing the senator's hand. Gaines had kept her promise too. The Education Committee had passed 3 major bills in the last year: increased funding for gifted programs in underserved areas, mandatory talent identification protocols, and grants for volunteer tutoring programs like the one Leonard had run. The changes were small in the scope of national education, but they were real. I want to introduce someone, Zara said, and gestured to the wings. A girl about 10 years old walked out shyly, Latina, wearing a Washington Academy uniform. This is Sophia Reyes. 6 months ago, she was at her neighborhood school, bored out of her mind because the math was too easy. Now she's in my coding class at the academy, building programs that solve problems most adults can't understand. Sophia waved nervously at the crowd, then returned to stand beside Zara. Sophia didn't need a viral video. She got identified through the new talent pipeline my mom built. That's how it's supposed to work. Zara paused. But it only works when we actually look. When we stop assuming that zip codes determine intelligence, that income predicts potential, that the kids serving at your charity gala couldn't also be the ones who should benefit from it. Robert Ashford flinched visibly at that line. Some people in the audience glanced his direction. He didn't look away. I'm grateful for everything that's happened, Zara continued. The scholarships. The opportunities. The platform to speak here today. But I'll be more grateful when stories like mine aren't news anymore. When every kid who loves learning gets the chance to pursue it. When the brilliant daughter of a custodian doesn't have to beat a billionaire at chess just to be seen. She clicked to her final slide, a photo of the chessboard from that night, with one addition, a crown digitally placed on the empty square where Zara had delivered checkmate. Chess taught me that every piece has value. That pawns can become queens. That the game isn't about your starting position, it's about how you play. Zara looked out at the audience. We need to build an education system that understands that. One that sees potential in every student, not just the ones who start with advantages. The applause was deafening. Zara stepped back from the podium, and Sophia gave her a hug. Diana made her way backstage, meeting her daughter with fierce pride. You were perfect, Diana said, pulling Zara close. I was so nervous, Zara admitted. There were so many people. You didn't show it. Diana held her daughter at arm's length. You know what I'm proudest of? Not the chess titles or the coding awards or this speech. I'm proud that you chose to lift other people up instead of just climbing higher yourself. Leonard Lawrence appeared, beaming. Brilliant, as always. Though you went 30 seconds over your time limit. We'll need to work on that before the TED Talk next month. Mr. Lawrence, Zara groaned. I'm 13. Can't I have one day without homework? Chess prodigies don't get days off, he said, but his eyes were twinkling. Though I suppose we could make an exception. Your mom told me there's a new ice cream place near the academy you've been wanting to try. Really? Zara's face lit up with an expression that reminded everyone she was still very much a child, despite everything. Really, Diana confirmed. But first, someone wants to talk to you. Robert Ashford stood nearby, hesitant. He'd lost weight in 18 months. Gained some gray hair. Looked less like a conquering billionaire and more like a man who'd learned hard lessons late in life. I don't want to interrupt, he said. I just wanted to say, the speech was remarkable. Everything you've built is remarkable. We built it together, Zara corrected gently. You, me, my mom, Mr. Lawrence, Senator Gaines. All of us. You're generous to say that. Robert shook his head. I provided money. You provided the vision of what it should become. Money was what we needed, Zara said simply. You had it. You chose to give it. That matters. Robert looked like he might cry. I saw your mother last week at the Chen Technologies office. She's transforming that company's entire hiring philosophy. They're finding talent in places they never looked before. Because someone taught her to demand being seen, Diana said, stepping forward. The same way she taught Zara. And the same way Zara taught me, Robert added quietly. He pulled an envelope from his pocket, handed it to Zara. This isn't part of the foundation. It's personal. From me. Zara opened it carefully. Inside was a check for $50,000 made out to Washington Academy Scholarship Fund, and a letter of recommendation for Zara's application to MIT's early college program. You don't have to do this, Zara said. I know. But I want to. You taught me that night that the measure of a person isn't where they start, it's whether they're willing to grow. Robert smiled slightly. I'm still growing. Probably will be for the rest of my life. But at least now I'm growing in the right direction. He shook Zara's hand formally, nodded to Diana and Leonard, and walked away. Not to the VIP reception where donors were gathering, but out the side door, alone. Some lessons, Diana thought, you have to learn in solitude. That evening, at the ice cream shop near Washington Academy, Zara sat with her mother and Mr. Lawrence, enjoying a sundae that probably had too much chocolate sauce. Can I ask you something? Zara said to Leonard. That night at Mr. Ashford's house. You were watching the security feed the whole time, right? I was, Leonard confirmed. Did you know I was going to win? Leonard smiled. I knew you had the skills to win. But I didn't know if you'd have the courage to show them. That was the real test, not whether you could play the moves, but whether you'd believe you deserved to. I almost didn't, Zara admitted. When he first asked me to play, I wanted to say no. To stay invisible like always. What changed? Diana asked. I saw your face, Mom. You were scared for me, but you were also proud. Like you knew I could do it even if I didn't. Zara took another bite of ice cream. I didn't want to let you down. Baby, you could never let me down. Diana's voice was thick with emotion. You're the best thing I ever did with my life. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Boston evening through the shop's windows. Students from the academy walked by, some Zara's classmates, others younger kids she tutored. Every single one of them waved. Mr. Lawrence, Zara said eventually, do you think people really change? Like Mr. Ashford? Leonard considered the question carefully. I think people can grow if they're willing to face uncomfortable truths about themselves. Whether that's change or just becoming more of who they were meant to be all along, he shrugged. That's a harder question. I hope he keeps growing, Zara said. I don't want to be the kid who destroyed someone. I want to be the kid who helped build something better. Then that's exactly who you'll be, Diana said firmly. Because you get to choose. Just like you chose to teach him instead of just beating him. Just like you chose to give this speech about lifting others up instead of just celebrating your own success. Zara smiled, and it was the same calm, knowing smile she'd worn across the chessboard 18 months ago. The smile of someone who understood that the real game was bigger than any individual match. That winning meant creating space for everyone to play, not just dominating the board yourself. If this story about a daughter who refused to accept limits, a mother who fought for her child's worth, and a system that finally started to change, imperfectly, slowly, but genuinely, has moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe that courage and talent can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. Subscribe to see more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply by refusing to stay invisible, by demanding to be seen not despite who they are, but because of it. Because Zara Mitchell's story isn't unique, it's just the one that got recorded. There are thousands of brilliant children in every city, waiting for someone to look close enough to see their potential. The question isn't whether they exist. It's whether we're finally ready to see them. 3 years after that night at the Ashford estate, Zara entered MIT at 15 as the youngest student in her class. Diana Mitchell was promoted to VP of Community Innovation at Chen Technologies. Leonard Lawrence published a book on identifying overlooked talent that became required reading in education programs nationwide. And Robert Ashford continued showing up every Tuesday at the community center, learning chess from children who taught him far more than game strategy. The viral video still circulated, a reminder that change often starts with exposure, of injustice, of blindness, of a system that works for some and ignores others. But it also circulated as proof that transformation is possible. Not easy. Not quick. Not without cost. But possible. Because on that night, a 12-year-old girl proved that true genius isn't about starting with advantages. It's about what you build with the pieces you're given. And sometimes, the most powerful move is extending your hand across the board and offering to teach your opponent how to play better. That's not just good chess. That's how you change the world.